Okay, welcome everybody today to our SCTE Gateway Leadership session. So today we're going to talk about leadership and career development as part of our monthly session. So we have two panel discussions, kind of an older panel and a younger panel. And then we're going to review some websites and do some other things in addition. So with that, you folks are probably familiar with our local chapter, right? You go to the technical trainings or attend the webinars that the Gateway chapter puts on, but there's also a lot of things that you may not be aware of or think of. So we kind of want to talk through some of those things and address that. So, right, every year we have our vendor day, which includes cable games and our golf outing. So that's our big day for the year where we get together. We try to combine all three of those events and try to fit it into one day for the vendors as well as for anybody else that attends. But there's other opportunities that come with the Gateway chapter, right? There's scholarships and training opportunities through the Gateway chapter. So we've been donating money to the national chapter or to the national for the foundation. But here in the near future, we're going to also get our local chapter together to start doing scholarships for people that want to develop themselves. There's always networking opportunities. In going to meetings, going to our vendor day or just the training sessions, right? There's always opportunity for networking. So some people think it's, you go to the presentation, you sit there and absorb the information and then leave. But kind of always keep in mind, there's always those opportunities to meet other people in the industry, colleagues, others that have been in the industry for a long time and basically build relationships and develop yourself technically. There's leadership opportunities, right? We have a board of directors. We had elections here that just happened in the last month, but there's always opportunities that you can participate in supporting the board, providing direction to the organization. And you can run for the board, be voted on, or there's also associate positions where you just don't necessarily have to be voted in, but you can participate, contribute in getting the work done and being part of the group. And then you're all aware, right? Multiple companies that are involved in this are Chartered Communications, who's hosting today, Madison, which is our company, as well as other companies like Sparklight and MediaCom, Fidelity Communications. So chance to meet people from other companies. So Cable One is another company, as well as all the vendors, right, that attend. We got Pete here today or this afternoon. So lots of vendor members that you can get to know. So just with the local chapter, right, that's all the things that we provide, but then nationally, there's lots of opportunities there, right, with the different seminars they put on, trade shows, emerging technologies, chapter leadership, SCTE Expo, cable games. There's just all kinds of opportunities to be involved, as well as all kinds of opportunities to develop yourself professionally, training, certifications, standards, all kinds of things. So just kind of wanted to introduce it and make sure everybody understood that there's more to the local chapter as well as to the organization nationally than just maybe the trainings that a lot of you participate in a regular basis. So with that, Dennis, is there any other comment?
I think the only thing we need to touch on is the cable games and vendor day. Locally, we have a show that Pete as a vendor shows up to and provides the local people the latest and greatest technology that's out there. With that, we do cable games. This morning we had Brian in our session. He won the cable games locally and was awarded a trip basically to Expo this year in Denver, last year I should say, and competed internationally in the cable games. So there's that opportunity for everybody if you get involved and want to come to the vendor day to just see what it's all about or participate in the cable games. You know, get in touch with your supervisor, find out how you can get involved, and that'll be in May coming up in 2024. So the opportunities are endless, and cable games opens up a lot of opportunities. One, to do your job better, to learn the technology better, and to network and get the opportunity to meet new people across the world, basically. So.
All right. So with that, we're going to start our first panel discussion and from there. Okay, so our first panel discussion here is with two cable veterans, and they both have a local presence in the St. Louis and Illinois chapters, as well as they have a national presence with the cable industry, SCTE, and other industry organizations. So first individual is Dick Beard, and the other individual is Tom Jokerst. So with that, we're going to ask them to give a little synopsis of their career. So if you would, please. If Tom would, you go first.
Okay, I'll go first.
Thank you.
Hi, Tom Jokerst, retired, sometimes just tired, but not today. This is kind of a fun event, and when and Dennis and other members, Patrick, Hunter, and others have done a lot of work putting this session together, and so we're happy, Dick and I are both happy to be here and share some of our, I won't say anything about knowledge, but we'll share some of our experience and guidance for those of you here in the audience and those that may be watching this at a later time. So my cable career started out in 1971, and I had, I guess if you do the math to this year, that would be about 52 years of experience, but it may have been more like 10 years of experience 5 times in a row, because many times things cycle and you repeat old experiences, but at a higher bandwidth. It's just a lot of things that you've seen circle back around. A lot don't as well, but it's interesting about the time that both of us have had in the industry and the things that we've seen develop and the things that we've seen repeat themselves. Prior to getting involved in the industry, I grew up southern Illinois, a little place called Kaskaskia Island. Grew up on a farm there and went to high school in St. Genevieve, and wasn't particularly a strong student. Wasn't really motivated strongly academically, but I was interested in music, and I was a guitar player and liked amplifiers, wah pedals, distortion pedals, and effects. And through that, got interested in electronics. And I went to, after high school, I went to Rankin Technical Institute here in St. Louis. I think at the time it was called the David Rankin Jr. School of Mechanical Trades. I think that was the official name. Today it's called Rankin Technical College, I believe. They had a 2-year program in communications, electronics, and computer technology. And I went through that, and it's a fantastic program, great instructors, taught a lot about not only electronics theory and how things work, but also how to prepare for life in an industrialized world. And so the instructors were ex McDonnell Douglas, ex-military, people who've had ex Raytheon, people that had serious work experience. So yeah, at the end of the program, I had several job opportunities, but also had an opportunity to go on the road with a band. And it was actually an Illinois-based band called the Jarrells, based around Greenville, Carlisle area. And I decided I could get one of these other jobs probably anytime, but I'd never get another opportunity to go on the road with the band. So I did that for the summer. It worked out interestingly, put it that way. But I would do it again in a heartbeat. And it certainly changed the career path that I had. Once that was over, I decided I wanted to actually go back to school and get a little more training. So I went to SIU Carbondale, finished a program down there. And at the end of that, through the University Placement Service, I had an opportunity to go to work for GTE, General Telephone Electronics, as a transmission tech in the microwave systems engineering. Or there was this thing called cable TV, of which I knew nothing about, but it was a startup opportunity in video engineering at the local origination channel in the cable system in Carbondale, which was being built at the time. So I took that, and that was the beginning of my cable career. Learned a lot about video and production, things of that nature, all around the local origination business. And in the interim, got pulled into the RF side of the business, both the head end and the distribution system, troubleshooting and doing other things of that nature. They also were building the cable system in Marion. I found myself, next thing you know, I'm the chief tech for both of those systems. And the company that owned the franchise also had systems in other parts in the country. Winchester, Kentucky, Logan, West Virginia, Hobbs, New Mexico, Fort Rucker, Alabama. And I started traveling to those locations pretty much as a field engineer. So I would go in and completely realign all the channel processors in the head ends, troubleshoot plant problems, pretty much anything technically that needed to be done. And that was a good learning experience. And after that, I ended up joining Continental Cablevision, based in Quincy, Illinois, and as director of engineering for a 3-state region. And during that time period, we started franchising St. Louis, the St. Louis market. And I was involved here during that franchising process and building the cable systems that Continental had under franchise. And of course, during that time at Continental Cablevision, Dick and I met one another, and I'll let him tell you the story about our first meetup at the system he was at in Lincoln, Illinois. But well, I can't hold it. The first time we met, he said, "I quit." So he said, I said, "Hi, I'm Tom Jokerst, the new engineer." He said, "Hi, I'm Dick Beard. I'm out of here." And he tells me it wasn't because of me, but I don't know. So we'll let him tell you the rest of the story. So during that time at Continental Cablevision, which I spent 17 years there, really good company, actually a great company, great culture, and really great people. My last 2 years there, I had the opportunity to take a 2-year program at Cable Labs in Boulder, Colorado. So I spent 2 years as an executive on loan from Continental at Cable Labs. Had a wonderful experience there, and learned a lot. And after finishing up there, I actually took some, I didn't mention this earlier, Lynn, but I took some time off for the '93 flood on the Mississippi. So actually took quite a lot of, much of that year, I was involved in trying to keep a flood from happening and then trying to clean up after it did happen. And then at the end of '93, beginning of '94, I joined Charter Communications. I was the 12th employee there and running engineering technical operations. At that time that I started, we had no customers and no cable systems. And the plan at the time was to acquire systems, fix them up, and create an MSO of about 200,000 customers. Well, we did substantially more than that. And of course, everybody here knows Charter's still going strong. So just another great experience there. Spent a number of years at Charter, and then had an opportunity to join a startup company called Broadbus Technologies. I went there as the chief technical officer, and Broadbus was building DRAM-based video servers for the cable industry. So I crossed over from the system operations side to the dark side as a vendor, if you will, and finished that opportunity after Motorola acquired Broadbus, and at that point in time, I took an early retirement due to an eyesight issue. So that's kind of my summary. I've been involved in the local chapter here since its inception, and back in the I guess it's really in the early '80s. Larry Lehman of CENTCOM, myself, started the chapter, and because of the number of operators in the market in the St. Louis area, this was just a good avenue for and a good method for system engineers, system technical people to talk to one another and share, discuss common problems and common solutions. So SCTE has been a really great thing for the industry, a great thing for myself from personal development standpoint. And that's kind of about what I got to say, Lynn. I don't know if you have any questions, or if anybody in the audience has any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Tom. Yeah, failed to mention earlier, but if anybody has any questions, right, interactive, feel free to ask these guys who've been in the industry for 40, 50 years, you know, anything. So with that, no questions. Dick, if you.
Sure. My name is Dick Beard. I grew up in Jacksonville, Illinois, which is about 80 miles north of here. As Tom said, he wasn't educationally inclined. I said this morning at 5 years old, my parents knew I wasn't going to college. And it's so I was never really driven that way. I started working at early ages at just whatever job I could find. I came out of school and couldn't find a job. I was married with a child, and the guy across the street was the chief tech for a company called Salmon's Communication. So I went over and asked him for a summer job till I found something, and he said sure. And I had a 360 pad trailer park and a cable company that had a trencher but no boring machine. So I dug about 3 feet under each side of the pad and then pounded an iron pipe through 360 times that summer, just so that they could pull the cable through. Ended up staying on with them. Shortly after that, I ended up at Continental in Quincy. Mine was all pole climbing, underground tower climbing, that type of stuff. So it eventually went to Lincoln, Illinois, where Tom and I first met. They were building a system there, and I kind of ended up from that point on being involved in the system builds on the field side. We built the system in Lincoln. When we started the system and built it, we had a manager, a chief tech, and 4 technicians. And the visit before I met Tom, the VP had told me that they were transitioning to operations, which was me as a manager, chief tech, and 1 technician, which means call every other week. I hadn't been on call for a few years, so I wasn't anxious to do that. Tom walks in and says, "Hi, I'm Tom Jokerst. I'm the new engineer." I said, "Hi, I'm Dick Beard. You're probably the guy I need to talk to." I quit. And that was it. So Continental quickly found me a position in Quincy. So I moved back there. And then it kind of mirrored because, in those days when I first started in Jacksonville, you had 6 channels and you had 98% penetration because the 6 channels were the 2 locals and 4 St. Louis that go down off a very high tower. And so that gave everybody the Cardinals. It gave you Channel 11. It gave you All-Star Wrestling on Sunday mornings. So that's what the rural people love. So wrestling at the Chase. Same way in Quincy. We had the same opportunity there because we microwaved all the St. Louis channels up to Quincy. That was the draw of the cable system. There was that you got the Cardinals. And I forgot Sesame Street. So Cardinals, Sesame Street, wrestling at the Chase. That were the 3 things that everybody wanted. When the satellite industry got started, we started putting in earth stations with HBO and a few of the other early channels. Then all of a sudden there was something on cable that the big cities didn't have. So that's when all the franchising started in the large cities, and they all started at once. So besides St. Louis, Tom and I both came down with a few people, and we started franchising. We started building. There are something like 86 communities in St. Louis County. Every one of them, for the most part, wanted their own franchise. And I think we ended up with 8 different cable companies with franchises. So, none of your markets were contiguous. You were always going through somebody else or having separate head ends. And eventually it all kind of came down to one with Charter after many, many years. We built that, worked here quite a while, and during that period of time, I was given the opportunity after quite a few years to start my own company. It was just as fiber was starting to be used in multiple fiber buildings, building interconnects, and that. And one of my vendors, Belden Cable, wanted to know if I'd want to start an engineering construction company and go out and get jobs, and they'd sell me the cable. And we were very successful at that. We had our first project awarded with the state of Missouri before I had my company set up. So it was a mad rush to get that set up. And Brentech went for about 5 years. I got involved very early on in a government project up at Rock Island Arsenal, Rock Island, Illinois, putting in a system. And from that relationship with that contractor, all of a sudden, I had a contract to wire all the dorm rooms at West Point Military Academy. I had a contract to put in a fiber run for video along the entire St. Lawrence Seaway. I ended up down at the Space Center, wiring Department of Education in DC, all their buildings. And like I said, I was just a guy who, a year before that didn't know what a piece of fiber looked like. But, I was just being dragged along, and I had some subcontractors who worked with me on the mainline construction and that. And it was a good job. It was a lot of fun, but it got too big for me. I ended up doing accounting and paperwork instead of technical stuff and installing. So I ended up selling out to a company who then hired me as an engineer to work on the fiber side with them. The eventually from that construction company, which was US Cable, Continental hired me back, went to Chicago. And then I had an opportunity to start a job with a startup company here in St. Louis called Millennium Digital Media. We had systems, we bought systems in the state of Washington, the state of Michigan, and the state of Maryland. So we were spread out all over the country. But it's, my whole part today as far as career development is to keep your mind open to opportunities, because I had a lot of them come my way, just sometimes out of nowhere, and how you decide whether it's a good one or a bad one for you and your family is 90% of that battle right there. While with Millennium, my best friend, who was the president of US Cable, he and his wife were killed in a plane crash. And they were in the process of a sale to a large consolidator called Arias out of Florida. And about a week after the funeral, Bill was the president of US Cable. About a week after the funeral, Arias came to me and wanted to know if I would want to take Bill's place and serve as president and then stay on with them after the sale. Now, bear in mind, up to this point, except for my own company, I had been operations. So I've been doing this 51 years. I've got probably 25 years operations, 26 years construction, and on the vendor side. And I probably never would have taken the job, except that I was the executor for a number of trusts for his kids and grandkids, all of which contained Arias stock. So if it didn't go through with Arias, or it didn't go well, the kids were going to lose all their money. So that kind of drove me to make that decision over probably what I would rather have done to stay in operations. And I've never regretted it. I've had a great run on the vendor construction side of it. Went from Arias to Irving Cable, which does a lot of work in the St. Louis area. Worked for them for quite a number of years until COVID hit, and I was laid off. So I am, I'm 70 years old at that time, and trying to decide, was it time for partial retirement? I didn't want to quit altogether. I was doing a little consulting work in a large distribution company called Wesco, which Wesco has purchased companies like Annixter, which a lot of people know, TDC, a lot of people know, and they were looking for somebody who both had experience with a lot of the grant funding and that was coming out of DC, which I had because of a board I was on, and then just kind of somebody, I would use the term more experienced than old, but it's that to mentor a lot of their younger guys. And so I was going to go on as a consultant, and their company lawyer said, no, he's got to be either start his own company or be a full-time employee. And so I ended up being a full-time employee, although I made it clear I was not going to work full-time. They were good with that. But so I told a story on my 70th birthday, I am getting my drug test. And so the technician at the drug clinic, he noticed, he said, oh, it's your birthday. I said, yeah. He said, you're 70 years old today. I said, yeah. He goes, why would a 70-year-old get a drug test? And I said, new job. And that guy just burst out, God, I hope to hell I'm not working when I'm 70 years old. So it's, but it's very low stress, no stress whatsoever. Called home, and it's really a mentoring, which I've loved doing all my life. And the SCTE has been a great outlet for that. So that's where I am now. I've had a lot of zigs and zags in a career, but I kept an open mind, and I looked at everyone, how it affects me, how it affects my family. Selfishly, I didn't turn many down. I always saw it as a way to move up. I never saw myself as a manager in the early days. Like I said, I spent probably 14 years climbing poles, for all day long, summer and winter, and thought that was going to be what I did. So my knees gave out, and then I become a warehouseman or something. So I didn't know for sure, and it just kept progressing. SCTE, I got involved before we came to St. Louis in the late 70s. Been involved with it ever since. I've been on the board here since pretty much since the beginning, almost very shortly after the beginning. I've served a number of leadership roles with this one through the years. I've also been on the Chicago board, and I'm currently on the board in Bloomington, Illinois, the Lincoln chapter. So that's how I got here.
So thank you, Tom, or thank you, Dick. So yeah, a couple of things that caught my eye there. One thing I find interesting is right, from the very beginning, when early in your career, right, you chose an industry and basically stayed in that same industry. So I think that's for both of you. So I think that's
But I tell you, like a lot of other people in cable, the day we took that job, we never thought it was going to be a career. You know, for me, it was a part-time summer job. And for a lot of other people, they got into it, never expecting it to be a career. But as we found out, with no college education, it was probably one of the few then, and it's still one of the few jobs that you can really progress up through the ranks into management positions, supervisory positions, management positions. You know, a lot of different kind of career paths in cable. Without a college education, without a formal education, I did end up taking a few college courses. I would end up getting promotions into areas where college was required, but they never asked me. So I never told them that I didn't have a college education. And sometimes when you start working with accountants and that type of thing, I ended up going back to community college just to pick up enough to know what they were talking about. But all of that was all paid for with scholarships from the SCTE. So that's another great thing about the organization.
Yep. Very good. Then, so yeah, one of our former chief techs or lead, I guess he was lead tech actually, was Dave Black, and he always called it show business. So, so I find it interesting that you guys got in show business and got in your blood and you couldn't get out.
If I can add on to what Dick was saying, and Dick, you also had a electronics education background too, right?
Yeah, I had a 2-year degree. It was kind of an all-purpose type of a thing, but not a lot of which I used in cable. But it's
But certainly my electronics training that I had was been extremely useful during the business, especially in the days when the business was more RF than certainly, you know, today. It's much fiber and RF both, but RF has always been interest to me, and I'm a ham radio operator now, so I'm doing everything at 50 ohms, not at 75 ohms anymore. But although there are some antennas that I make out of 75 ohm coax, so it's there's still some RG11 and some things like that around the shop at home. But what Dick said, and I'll add to, is just the aspect of the business. And this has been a great industry and great interaction with people. For me, it wasn't really work. I enjoyed it. You could have fun, you could accomplish things, and you learned. And there were just opportunities all the time. So whether the opportunity was working with a vendor to develop something or make an improvement to something that you already had, or that you've got a particular problem that you need a piece of equipment to solve, there were just all of those opportunities in the day, and I know those still exist here as well today. So it's it's a lot of fun, and it's, like I said, it hasn't been really work for me. Not that it didn't work, but it was work I enjoyed. More like fun.
So another point I picked up there was, so your relationship got off to a rocky start, but you guys are good friends now, right? After all those years working together, you go out to dinner or lunch on a regular basis.
Yeah, we do. We kind of got away from it here in the last few months, but we have a monthly kind of a dinner group. All of them related to the cable industry somehow. The people we met. The one thing about the cable industry is that you develop it, for whatever reason, you develop relationships more than other industries that I've seen. My son is been a lawyer for 8 years with a big firm downtown, and he's this Friday graduates from nursing school, giving up the lawyer degree and going to be a nurse. And a lot of it had to do with just the fact that he couldn't build relationships. There was no office, there was no office kind of friendliness there, getting to know people. my wife makes a joke that, at my funeral, if I go first at my funeral, she's gonna make everybody wear a tag that says who they are and how they knew me, because she won't know anybody. Everybody I know, except for family pretty much is cable or SCTE. Or that's where you met them, that's where you've known them for, 10, 20, 30, 40 years. I tell the story that Guy Nichols' dad was my chief tech in Quincy, and we still stay in touch, not as much as we should, but we still, know each other and are very friendly. So like I said, with cable, it's, you call it a family, you call it, a great industry in that, but a lot of it, besides just the work, has to do with the relationships you develop and keep, through the years.
I like to say, people ask me if I miss work, and I like to say, I don't miss the rat race, I just miss the rats. So that's pretty true. But it's different, and we didn't really get off to a rocky start. We just like to use that story to make people think that we've been great friends and associates the whole career.
So Tom, you mentioned you were the 12th employee, but I thought I had it in my notes where you were the 13th charter employee.
There might have been some people there that would try to imply that, but maybe unlucky hire, but no, it was actually number 12.
Okay.
Or if I'm wrong about the 12, it was 11.
All right. Very good. Okay, so thank you for sharing your history there. If you would, sounds like you spent a lot of time in the St. Louis area, right, in the early days of cable. If you would just provide a few details about what it was like to kind of kick things off in the cable industry, especially locally here in St. Louis.
Well, Dick and I were both involved here, similar time. I was in the regional office with Continental based in Quincy, and we relocated the regional office to St. Louis during the franchising. We call them franchising wars because they practically were. It was serious competition between the 5 unincorporated St. Louis County franchise areas and all the other municipalities in the county that were in the metro area that were awarding franchises. And there were, gosh, I'm trying to think of all the companies that were here. Store, Salmons, ATC, Warner, United Video, Continental, Teleprompter. What am I leaving out, Dick?
There was 8 total.
That's quite all the major companies that were in here vying for franchises, and each one trying to outdo the other in terms of what they were offering, either in advanced, either more bandwidth or in some cases dual cable. Folks that are working in this area will still notice major differences in system, whether it's construction or the technology that's there. Much of that is still resulting legacy from how it was originally built the first time around, and it was all built by different operators with different engineers with different equipment manufacturers. So it takes quite a while for that to change out. I'm sure a lot of it probably has changed by now, but there was a tremendous amount of activity. Satellite technology is what enabled the metro markets to be developed, and all this was going on not only here in St. Louis, but it was going on countrywide throughout the United States.
Yeah, and I started out in Belleville and with the Metro East systems over there with Continental, then transferred over to Overland when we started building in St. Louis proper. And as far as what it was like, when you stop thinking about it, you got to hire a labor force from scratch, to outfit a pretty large operation here, and nobody really had that much experience. And we were hiring, grocery store clerks and teaching them how to climb. And a lot of that, again, the opportunities that presented themselves. There is a gentleman came out of the Navy and asked for a job in our warehouse just until he found something. And he is a regional engineer for a cable company now. There's a number of installers, technicians that I hired back in those days that moved on to pretty lucrative careers at higher levels of cable companies. And I'll get together tomorrow night with a group in Belleville of about 8 guys who are now retired, all of which stayed at the technician level, and we're just as happy as could be. So it's just depends on what you want to do. I told the joke this morning, but it was true. A guy told me one time, he said, when you get into cable, you got to have 2 paths. You're going to take the technical engineering, that path, or you got to take the chief tech supervisor management path. And he said, the way you know which path he has, if you can climb up on a pole and you can turn a screwdriver with your left hand and open an amplifier, you're going to be a technician engineer. If you can't, you're going to be a manager, because you're going to get tired of doing that after a while. So, but that path is open everywhere. I never thought I would be a manager, and it just developed. The chief tech job was open, and I decided to take it, and it's just worked its way up, from there.
So that was back building cable in St. Louis in the early 80s. So 40 plus years ago, or 40 years ago. So about that same time, you both were influential in starting or participating in the SCTE, especially locally. Can you speak a little to that?
Well, I'll let Dick talk about the local. I'll talk about SCTE more from a national standpoint. Back when I first wanted to join SCTE, I became aware of it. It was a fairly small group of people, and you had to have a sponsor to join. So you had to know somebody who was already a member who would vouch for you and sponsor you for membership into the organization. And the chief engineer for the company I was working for at that time was such a person. In fact, he was one of the charter members of the organization, and he was going to sponsor me. And they only had meetings once a year, so this was kind of a long cycle. And he unfortunately died before that sponsorship occurred. So it took me a couple, 3 more years to find another person who I could ask to sponsor me into the organization. Fortunately, now it's a lot easier to join SCTE than it was back then. But it was a fairly small group of serious engineers associated with the industry. And it ultimately developed into an organization that started having conferences and started out with reliability conferences, and people would gather fairly large numbers to hear presentations, and others give papers about ways to improve cable system, either performance or reliability. And a lot of some of their early fiber cascade reduction approaches came from those kinds of things. And then that just further developed into Cable Tech Expo, and again, more of a opportunity to go to the shows and meet with vendors, hear presentations and papers, just a lot of the good things that SCTE does, along with standards development. So kind of a departure, Lynn, from your question, but wanted to make sure I covered that. And Dick, maybe you can talk a little bit about.
So, as in the early days of the SCTE, there wasn't as much of a difference between national and the chapters as there is now, but it's really developed because, at the national level, they're really looking at a lot of the high level things. One of the things we had to have in the industry was standardization. In the early days when we'd start, people who were making the F connectors would have a tolerance range. And people who were making the F81 barrel splices and ground block on the female side, they would have a tolerance range. But if the receiving end was at the high end of the range and the entering end was at the low end of the range, nothing worked. And there was a lot of that in the industry. So they started developing standards committee to really lock down with the manufacturers what it was going to take to be accepted by the cable industry. And then this was eventually recognized, by the federal government as the standard setting, for broadband in the cable industry. And they've also gotten very involved on the international front at the national level, and they do a great job of doing some real high tech, work with cable labs and white papers, and you're going to hear more about that later. But the other side of the SCTE is kind of the side that I was most interested in, and everybody that is the leadership here for the most part is more involved in than they are national. And that's the chapters. And the chapters, to me, the whole reason the chapters were ever developed was training. So it was a means of, engineers and management creating these technical sessions. And we were very, very successful before COVID. This chapter probably had the best success rate of training going on, because we were doing them every month, I believe. And we had probably in a day's time, anywhere from 70 to 100 more people over the 2 sessions. COVID kind of put a stop to that, but trying to get back to the in-person again. We've got a lot of them online, that you can get with webinars and streaming and that. We've been doing quite a bit of that, but our whole purpose is I believe is to train. And the other thing is with the vendor day, what we try to do there is we try to bring the aspect of the national show, which very limited people get to go to. Try to bring that here to St. Louis so that you can all see that. And if you never pass up the opportunity to go to the vendor day, we're back up to about 50 vendors. All of them are happy to talk to you. It's interesting to stop by and just see what everybody's doing, and they want to hear back from you, as to how their equipment works and things that you see that could be improvements, that type of thing. The other thing they're very good at is with the scholarship programs, and they're going to talk about that a little bit later. But I can tell you that a number of us here have used those scholarship programs, and financially they're a big help, especially in the early parts of your career. But it's just a good backup there, to help you with your career. And then the other thing is the networking, and you can't overstress. There are people who I've met. The majority of people I've met have not been through my job in cable. It's been through my interaction through the SCTE, whether at vendor days, whether at meetings, whether at training sessions, that type of thing. And what that does is it gives you a wider base of people that know you and that as you look to continue your career in that. So the chapter, we're looking out for you. We were the chapter of the year last year. That's based on a number of points of measurable point system. We don't chase points. We ended up being that chapter of the year, not because we looked and said, oh, we get this many points for this and this many points for that. We had the training, we had the outreach, we had helping out with some local charity type stuff. Just really being there to support the people. That's what we were all about. It's the only reason we're doing it. So.
Very good. Well, appreciate you guys, bringing that to St. Louis, right? 40 years ago, because I think your leadership back then is continued for 40 years in providing opportunities for many people. That I think we're 200 or 300 members currently. So certainly appreciate you guys taking your time and having the foresight to get involved in that and do that for the area, for technicians. So, little story. Tom, I think you have an interesting story about the best investment you ever made in yourself. And it had to do with, kind of an industry trade show and what you decided to do kind of for yourself. So
yeah, thanks, Lynn. I would, and I think I maybe used those terms, Lynn, when I told you this some time ago, that the best investment I ever made in my career was in the early days. that I would take my vacation time and at my own expense would go to a trade show. So in those days, it was the National Cable Television Association convention. And typically in Chicago, there were probably other cities, but I think Chicago is the one that I would go to more often because it was, drivable distance and no airplane flights involved. And I would basically go there more so just to be on the show floor, see what equipment was being displayed, talk to vendors, find out about things that I didn't know even existed. You would see the future, where the industry was going with what was being shown and displayed. So that was a good payback for me. It actually enabled one of my jobs, career changes. An individual that I met there later gave a referral to my boss from Continental Cablevision to hire me. So that was just kind of one of the kind of things that can happen when you get yourself out there and network and meet people. I also saw a device there that was on display, kind of a prototype, early development for impulse noise reduction, for take the electrical interference sparklies out of over-the-air broadcast, particularly low-band stations. And I saw that device there years and years before I got into a position where I could buy something like that. And make a long story short, I saw it there, tried to relocate it years later. It was just something that was done by an R&D group just to see if there was any interest, and nothing was ever done on it. And then when I was at Cable Labs, I had the opportunity to go about the process of developing a product like that. Not that I actually did the development on it, but I managed the development of that and brought a product to the market that was commercialized and used to reduce either satellite impulse noise, threshold noise, or power line electrical interference out of video signals. So that was, kind of an example of what can happen and how things can turn just by getting involved in showing up at a trade show and learning what you can learn, and in some cases making the opportunity to do it.
Yeah, taking advantage of the opportunities that are before you. So yeah, I like that story about people taking their vacation time and going to industry events. So I don't know, any of you guys feel free. So
It's a good investment.
all right. So keys to success. So right, you've been in the industry for many years. Any keys to success, Dick? I think you've self-proclaimed yourself to be the biggest fraud in the industry, or
So this goes back, your keys to success. Dennis and I laugh about this, but my parents always told me that the keys to success are use common sense, treat people right, and work hard at whatever it is you're going to do, and somebody can teach you the rest of it. You really go into just
fun as well as made it a
and learn
competitive
what that industry
environment.
is. But it's the people that stand out are the people that you got to get along with people. You can't. One of the things in our industry we always say is don't burn a bridge, because in this industry that bridge always comes back to bite you. And just use good common sense and how do you deal with people in that. The whole fraud thing comes from Tom and I are both members of the SCTE Engineering Hall of Fame, and along with a couple other. I say you live long enough and don't, don't tick any people off and you're gonna get some awards. You don't have to do anything, you just gotta live a long time and not make anybody mad. But but the whole engineering thing, I'm not an engineer. It's, and probably 90% of what you deal with on a day-to-day basis, I can do RF troubleshooting, that's about it. I used to train people on how to use pads and equalizers. And then I go to a training session and you're talking about, quadrature modulation, all this type of stuff. And I know nothing about that. It's, so the fact that I'm getting these awards, I've managed engineers. I've been managing engineers for a long time, either on the operating side, construction side. And I always equate myself to the orchestra leader who doesn't play any instruments. I don't know how to do what it is everybody that works for me does, but I know what the song is supposed to sound like on the tail end of it. And I know what each guy's job is. So as long as I, guide them and manage them, not get in their way and let them do their job and coordinate the output, that's been the key to the management in my mind. It's been the people that work for me. And like I said, making sure that you let them know what you want to do. If you got good people, all you got to do is let them know what you want to do and get out of the way and make sure that they just stay on task and on time. And it's and they get it done for you. But
Set the tempo, right?
that's right.
And Dick certainly is known well throughout the industry for doing that. A lot of respect for his management and development capability.
Tom, do you have any secret sauces or anything that you found over your career led to success?
Well, I don't know. My dad once told me, he said, if the job's worth doing, it's worth doing right. And what I interpreted by that is it's worth doing well. And I tried to do that as much as I could. And not that things turned out perfect, but as well as I could do them. And I think I was just fortunate to get involved in the business. It's just a great industry. As Dick said, a lot of business is done on relationships, and you know the people that you want to be associated with, and that you like working around, and it's just been a great industry. So I don't know how all of a sudden my mic is ringing, but it is.
So yeah, my dad had that same saying, but he used to say it in German. So I don't know. Your dad didn't say it in German, did he? No.
Nine.
Okay. So one thing I've noticed, right, about what we've talked about here is the fact that, neither you two gentlemen have a formal or Tom, you have an associate's degree.
Associate degree. Yeah.
And Dick, you have a
degree. It's a degree. So I've been so long ago, I don't know if it was an associate or it was a 2-year. It was a 2-year.
So no bachelor's degree, no master's, PhD, or anything like that. But you both have been very successful in the communications industry. So I think the cable industry is unique like that, right? That you can, without a lot of formal education, you can be very successful in the industry. So, any comments or any feelings that supports that?
I would say that I actually like to think of myself as a better technician than an engineer. I managed engineering and did it as responsible more from a systems standpoint and more from determining architecture, determining the higher level approaches. I never designed amplifiers from the in to the outs. I knew how they worked and I could fix them, But that was never my job. It would be of interest to me, but nothing that I actually did. I still like playing with that stuff. And with my ham radio hobby, I'm fairly active return path ingressor. I operate a HF shortwave station from 1.8 to 30 megahertz. So you all kind of know what's in there.
Thanks,
And,
Tom. Appreciate that.
yeah, it's okay. But I actually got a pretty clean bill of health. I don't, and this helps as well, as the plant is underground in the area where I live. So I'm not really creating too much of, in fact, I haven't been able to see any return path in the local system there around my house. But I do, enjoy the engineering and the technology side of things. But certainly, I couldn't, I mean, I know what channel bonding is, but I've never had to set it up or troubleshoot it, and things of the higher DOCSIS standards, et cetera. So I feel like I was in the, electronics at a great transition point, kind of transitioning from vacuum to technology to solid state, and then Dick would have been in that same time frame, and also in cable, going from analog to digital, and now from almost all IP. So I don't know if I answered your question or not.
Yes, yep.
Yeah, and again, as I said a while ago, it's one of the few industries you don't need that four-year agreement. People think we had a lot more opportunities because we were in at the early stages of it. As Tom said, I used to work on amplifiers that the case was as big as that table right there, hanging on 4x4s on the side of a pole with two big tube type amplifiers. And none of you will remember the TV repairman who walked up around with a box full of tubes and just kept changing until we found the right one. But that's what you're doing up on the pole with a amplifier that's probably running at about 140 degrees and all electric in the snowstorm or a rainstorm. It was a lot of fun, but but I think in some ways there's more opportunities now than there was back then, because when we got into it, it was RF and it was stringing poles. It was like a telephone. You're stringing lines, and then you're like a plumber. You're putting connectors together and sending stuff through it. Now with the fiber, with digital, with all the marketing that's going on there, and and let's face it, the only winner probably out of COVID was broadband. It's probably the only thing that's seen a positive impact, and that's not going to go away, because it became obvious to everybody that, like power and like telephone, everybody needs broadband. And I know that Kai was here a while ago. I know his main, his job now is managing Charter's projects with the RDOF money, which is money that was put out there to wire the more rural areas just outside your footprints that weren't getting cable before. So, I think we are still a growing industry, which is amazing to say after both of us have been in it over 50 years. It's been around for probably 65, I believe. It's about how far back it goes, but it's the fact that it's still a dynamic and growing industry, that there's that much room to expand after all this time is pretty amazing, and that just opens opportunities for everybody.
So, any questions for the audience for these cable legends that we have?
I think that was special that made those opportunities just pop up in front of you over all those years. What magic voodoo did you?
I just stayed alive and they kept coming at me. So, but like I said, some of them are unfortunate. My friend dying in an airplane crash is unfortunate. A lot of it though is just it's being out there, networking with people, hearing about them, and then the other thing is that you gotta have an open mind and recognize an opportunity when you see it. You hear about somebody that's doing this or somebody that's starting this and that type of thing. But honestly, after a certain point, the opportunities came from me because you develop a reputation as, you know, is either a good manager or an excellent engineer. Let's face it, right now, the workforce is in pretty bad shape as far as availability of people. And especially people that want to work hard, you know, and that want to earn their money rather than be entitled to something. And that's going to continue. And that's, you know, I can't imagine that before all this beat money and everything, that somebody's out there looking for a 70-year-old guy out of work, you know, to come work for them. But, you know, I was recruited by this company and I'm glad they did, but it's, you know, you just got to be aware of the opportunity and you got to have some kind of idea where it is you want to go. You know, if you look around at your managers and your supervisors and that, you know, I'm sure they didn't go into cable thinking I want to be a manager. No, they wouldn't do it because they either needed a job or they liked the outside work and just the technical and hands-on side of it. And it, but you know, you will find that you start taking the lead, you start helping out newer guys. You know, that it is easy for you to talk to people and express your views in that, and you just have just a natural inclination to want to be involved. And it's and you know, then I think those opportunities find you.
So you see the opportunity and then you act on it, right?
Right, and you got. I didn't act on every opportunity. I'm sure Tom didn't either. But you know, you got to balance. You got to balance. You know, the pros and the cons, like anything else. You got to think of your family. We all, you know, we all have or will have families, presumably. And it's Tom and I were both lucky because we both married women who were in the cable industry, so they were pretty understanding. They knew what they were getting into. I think but yeah, you know, like I said, an opportunity doesn't have to be this massive thing. It can be a project. It could be somebody offering you to say, hey, you want to go over and run this little project here or there, something, and it just starts honing your skills. So.
Yes.
One thing I did is I had an opportunity to work in a lot of different systems early on, and they were all different. And I saw how people did things differently and saw how many things didn't work well. And so when it came time to build your own systems, you benefited from having seen what didn't work in many other situations. So that was you know, really helpful. And I was kind of good at finding fault with things, whether equipment, I could, you know,
I worked for a while last for that.
Doing troubleshooting and
You're a fault finder.
well, maybe you could say that. My wife would definitely concur with that, but it got to the point where vendors would bring ideas and things to me to look at, even evaluate equipment, because I would point out where the weak spots were, and where this wasn't going to work quite right, or did you think about this, or did you think about that? So again, just kind of a byproduct of being out there and enjoying what you're doing, and you know, trying to make things better.
Very good. Any additional question? Thank you, Hunter. Any other question? So let's touch a little bit on some interesting points in both your careers. Dennis, maybe you can ask this one. You had experience where you were out at the recent Cable Tech Expo, and you got a tour of the Cable Labs, which is kind of the cable TV museum.
Yeah, so recently Hunter and I were in Denver and got the opportunity to go to Cable Center, which is the kind of the history of cable TV museum, so to speak, and they archive all of the different pieces of equipment up through the ages of cable TV. And the gentleman that gives the tour, you know, we were coming to the end, and he points out the first cable modem ever installed. It was the size of the desktop PC, and it was kind of neat to be able to say, hey, I know the guy that installed that. So and he didn't He didn't bat an eye because Dick had already been there, but Dick installed the
I
first.
didn't know dinosaurs had
Yeah,
cable modems and
yes,
internet.
we did. You know, I told you when I had my own company, my first defense job was at Rock Island Arsenal. And we were putting in a dual cable network, but then we were hooking up these massive, at the time, it's called Appletech, then it became Land City cable modems. And it's, you know, it's not the first modem that's out there, but it was the first modem specifically made for broadband and, you know, for coaxial hookup and that. And it was made by a guy named Bruce Bagucini, who I still know today. And I was going through the cable museum and this guy's giving this whole tour. He said like that, he said, now this is the first cable modem ever installed. And it was put in at Rock Island Arsenal by Bruce Bagucini, his company. And I said, I know who puts that in. He goes, who? And I said, me. He goes, what do you? And I said, well, I said, my company had the contract for it. And we did all the installations. He says, but how do you know you did it? I said, I was the only employee. No, I put them all in. So it's, but it was kind of cool that it was there. And I talked to Bruce Bay after that, and he's kind of known as the father of the cable modem. He's writing a book, and he wanted a chapter on Rock Island Arsenal. And you know, he said he wanted me to give him a white paper about how it all went. I said, no, at my age, I can't write about something like that. You have somebody call me, you know, and ask me questions. I could probably answer questions, but you know, it'd be hard to remember all that. But it was, and like I said, it wasn't the easiest thing, you know, to get operating, but we got it going. And the interesting thing about Rock Island Arsenal is that they handle the logistics for the supply side of all the armed forces between there and a building down in downtown St. Louis, which you will never know what it is because you can't get into it. But not just for that, but at that time also all of the naval forces. So we had an outage one Labor Day that we had Labor Day to get it down. They were replacing all the modems. I was going to do equipment repair on the plant, and then we were going to turn it back on. But instead of turning it on a leg at a time and seeing if they had a problem, they just switched it on, and it crashed. And when it came time for us to have it back on, and we didn't, now the entire supply chain of the armed forces was down, and we got it back up. But about a year later, I sold my company, and I went up there to say my goodbyes. And the general, and if you've ever met a general, they are impressive people. And this guy was a Philippine about 5'3" who I saw make big guys cry, you know. And he said, just know that if this ever goes down again, there will be a helicopter coming to St. Louis to find you, because you will be back up here. So it's but you know, the opportunity on those kind of things, like you say, you don't plan on that kind of stuff. You know, you don't even know you're part of it when you take it part. So you find out later that was the first installation that they had done.
Free taxes, right?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. We have to go one more thing.
Yeah, go ahead, Tom.
So that's a great story, Dick. And one thing I didn't mention, Lynn, I don't know if I told you this or not, but when I spent in the mid-70s, I spent 2 years in Winchester, Kentucky, just a little east of Lexington. Took care of the cable system there, and I took on a part-time job taking care of the local radio station. So there was a AM daytime only station, and I had a first-class FCC license, so I was authorized to maintain the transmitter. And so I took care of the studio and the transmitter system there, kind of on a part-time basis, and that was a lot of fun as well. And that was another great experience. 2 years in my cable, early cable career. So that's the radio broadcasting stuff still comes in handy, especially with ham radio. And interestingly, the transmitter came from Quincy, Illinois. Gates BC1F. They had the first light emitting diodes. They were mercury vapor rectifiers. And when they fired up, you would see light out of them. They weren't solid state, but they were LEDs.
So a couple other key or interesting points, right? Both of you are SCTE Hall of Fame members. So, that's an honor bestowed on just a few people, so could one of you or both of you speak to that a little bit?
Well, you know, like I said, you know, you get a lot of, you live long enough and you don't make anybody mad, you get a lot of awards. That's what I'm particularly proud of, because it's kind of a tough group to get into. It's really based on your what you've given back, you know, to the business. It's not based on who knows the most about engineering. It's interesting. Probably one of the top awards in cable is what's called the Pioneers Society, and Tom and I are both members of that as well. And the Pioneers put like 20 to 25 people in every year. I counted a break. There are 48 members since the beginning of cable. There are 48 members in the Hall of Fame, and a number of which have now passed on. I think I was number 38, and I believe you were about 32. So and it's but what it is, and the nice thing about that one is that it is a group of people who even now the modern national society and that will run things by just to get our perspective. Sometimes our perspectives don't agree because we're old school, they're new school. They're trying to get to new places and that type of thing. And sometimes folks like us, we have a tendency to kind of like things the way they are. But it's a great group of people. It's just another opportunity for networking. And I meant to say this a while ago, but with these guys, as I was coming up, the guys that were there ahead of me, and you take a look at all the people that are involved in this chapter net, we spend our time in this chapter to assist you guys. So we are always here. If you've got an issue, if you've got something you don't understand, if you got something you want to do, if you just need advice and everything, anybody in our chapter, as well as probably your supervisors and that, they're going to give you, they're going to talk to you and find out what you want. Because I always told managers who work for me later, and this was pounding into my head early on, that if you've got an employee that you have to fire, or you have an employee that you have to discipline, that's as much a failure of your management as it is on their on their actions on the job and that type of thing. So if you start looking at it like that anybody you have to discipline, anybody you have to suspend, anybody you have to let go, if you look at that as your failure, not theirs, you work a lot harder before that happens, to get them back on track. But you're gonna hear a lot about the SCTE. We haven't talked about, but get involved if you want in the board. We have associate memberships, which basically it's a non-voting membership where you come to the meetings, you work with us, and the things that you learn. I didn't talk about this too much this morning, but you'll learn things you aren't going to learn in your job that could benefit you later. Time management, how to run meetings, how to take reports, that type of thing. You'll get exposed to that type of thing at that level long before you might on your job. But it's good experience, and it also kind of lets you know whether it's something that you want to do or not. So.
All right, Lynn, if I could add to that, just with the Hall of Fame, generally members of the Hall of Fame are elevated to that or nominated to that because they've done something. And Dick, certainly with the chapter leadership involvement, myself, I was involved in some of the early certification test questions. I wrote a lot of the test questions for some of the early certifications, for some of the BCTE testing. And also, I don't think I mentioned, but I'm a SCTE emeritus member. That means if you've been a continuous member for, I think it's 40 years, your membership status changes. I don't have to pay annual dues, and I can go to the expo pretty much full pass at no charge, at least no registration charge. And Dick would be the same, except that you had 1 year that you changed addresses and your membership didn't get to you or something like that.
Yeah, I'm finding out there's more and more people, because Patrick's one of them too, or Hunter's one of them too, that there seems to be a group of people that there was a blip somewhere along the line, and we lost a year of eligibility, so we started over, so I have to pay for mine. I have to pay for mine.
Brian.
Yeah, so I think I heard you say there's 40 members in the Hall of Fame, right? 48, so 50. I think we said earlier, maybe there were 60 chapters. So the fact that the Gateway chapter, right, has 2 of those, right? I think we're extremely fortunate that our chapter has individuals like yourself that have distinguished careers and that you make yourself available, right, to the members of the Gateway chapter. So I'm certainly grateful that I got to meet you guys through this. Otherwise, I'm not convinced we would have ever met. And, you know, you've helped me out numerous projects, numerous items. So certainly appreciate all you've done for the industry, all you've done for the local chapter, as well as all you've done for me personally. So,
Our pleasure.
So with that, is there any additional questions? Well,
Thank you,
gentlemen,
guys.
thank you. Well, a round of applause for our panel. So with that, we'll take a short break and then we'll reconvene with another discussion panel.